The Brumare class comprised 16 submarines built for the French Navy as part of a significant 1906 program. The goal was to bolster the nation's submarine forces amidst rising tensions in Europe. This program facilitated a substantial expansion of the submarine fleet for coastal defense, scouting, and torpedo attacks, operating alongside surface ships. It reflected France's strategic reliance on cutting-edge naval technology to deter neighboring powers. This class marked a major stride in French shipbuilding, transitioning from experimental designs to dependable production submarines capable of extended patrols. The program's scope also underscored France's serious commitment to submarines in the lead-up to 1914. While French engineers had explored various concepts, Maxime Leboeuf's approach proved the most practical. He proposed a balance between a vessel that could withstand and maneuver at sea and one that could operate effectively while submerged. His earlier submarine, the Narval, launched in 1899, demonstrated the core principle, housing a robust, rounded pressure hull within a lighter outer hull shaped like a conventional torpedo boat. By the time the Brumare class was commissioned, this principle had evolved from an experiment into a recognized design philosophy that influenced submarine construction well beyond France. Designed by naval engineer Maxime Leboeuf, the Brumare-class submarines featured his signature double-hull construction. The pressure hull was concealed within an outer shell for enhanced structural integrity and improved streamlining when submerged. This design improved buoyancy control thanks to ballast tanks integrated directly into the double-hull structure. It allowed for quicker dives and provided better stability compared to single-hull predecessors, while also enhancing capabilities for underwater ambushes. The design incorporated a diesel-electric power plant with adapted German MAN engines. This resolved the reliability issues of earlier steam systems and offered greater surface endurance for transit and repositioning. This was a direct response to the success of the British Holland-class boats and German U-boats, which relied on efficient diesels for ocean voyages. The two hulls served distinct purposes. The inner pressure hull shielded the crew, batteries, control systems, and machinery from intense water pressure. The lighter outer shell endowed the submarine with better seakeeping qualities when running on the surface. The space between the hulls housed ballast and equipment that didn't require a pressure-resistant compartment. This configuration gave Leboeuf's boats a greater reserve of buoyancy than many early single-hull models, allowing them to handle like small surface ships during long transits. The drawback was the mechanical complexity, necessitating more valves, vents, and tanks that had to function flawlessly every time the boat submerged or surfaced. Compared to the preceding Pluviose class of 1905, the Brumare submarines benefited from a series of upgrades, particularly in engine efficiency and weapons arrangement. Both classes shared Leboeuf's double-hull philosophy and similar torpedo armament, featuring a bow torpedo tube and external Drzewiecki drop collars for broadside launches. However, the diesel plant on the Brumare improved surface speed and range, addressing the issues the Pluviose class faced with dive times and operational flexibility. Diving capabilities were also enhanced, with the boats reaching a diving depth of around 131 feet during trials. This allowed them to operate more aggressively in hazardous waters. These advancements highlighted the French Navy's incremental approach to developing submarine warfare in the period leading up to World War I. Even with these upgrades, the submarine Foucault represented a transitional generation. It wasn't a modern submarine in the way we think of them today, capable of staying underwater for days. The most efficient way to travel was still on the surface, where the diesel engines provided the speed, range, and power needed to recharge the batteries. Submerging was reserved only for attack, hiding, or escaping. So, every patrol became a constant balancing act of calculating distance, battery charge, visibility, weather, and the risk of being spotted while ventilating or charging on the surface. The Brumare-class submarines were named after months of the French Republican calendar, like Brumare itself, and also after prominent scientists and inventors. This was intended to foster national pride in their intellectual and revolutionary heritage. For instance, the submarine Foucault was named after physicist Leon Foucault, renowned for his work with light and the gyroscope. This aligned with the class's overall theme of honoring those who advanced science. This naming tradition underscored the role of these vessels as symbols of French engineering in naval engineering. The French submarine Foucault, a member of the Brumare class, had a surface displacement of 391 long tons and a submerged displacement of 542 long tons. Its overall length was 171 feet, with a beam of nearly 18 feet and a draft of 10.5 feet. These dimensions reflected the vision of designer Maxime Leboeuf, who created a compact coastal submarine specifically for operations in the Mediterranean Sea. Surface propulsion was handled by two MAN diesel engines, delivering a combined output of 828 horsepower. When submerged, the boat utilized two electric motors producing 651 horsepower, which powered two propeller shafts. The submarine could achieve a surface speed of 13 knots and a submerged speed of 8.8 knots. Its range was 1,700 nautical miles at a surface speed of 10 knots or 84 nautical miles at a submerged speed of 5 knots. The diving depth was 131 feet. The crew consisted of 29 men, including 2 officers and 27 sailors. These figures clearly illustrate the difference between surfaced and submerged operations. At 10 knots, a theoretical range of 1,700 nautical miles translated to roughly 170 hours underway. That's just over 7 days of continuous movement, without accounting for weather, course changes, mechanical issues, or the necessary fuel reserves. However, 84 nautical miles submerged at 5 knots equated to less than 17 hours, even under ideal conditions. In practice, commanders always held back some battery charge for maneuvering, emergencies, and making an attack run. Consequently, extended submerged patrols near an enemy base became a true test of patience. Submerged speed was reduced to the absolute minimum to conserve power, and every additional running motor or lit bulb posed a threat to the boat's endurance. The submarine lacked a deck gun, so everything relied on torpedoes and surprise attacks. Its armament included one internal 17.7-inch bow torpedo tube, along with external systems. These comprised one twin and 2 single Drzewiecki drop collars, plus 2 more single external launchers. In total, Foucault carried 8 torpedoes, 2 internally and 6 externally. The external Drzewiecki systems allowed for rapid torpedo launch without the complex reloading required for internal torpedo tubes. This kind of external system gave a small submarine a powerful initial salvo without taking up interior space within the pressure hull with extra torpedo tubes. In the Drzewiecki apparatus, the torpedo sat in an open rack outside the hull. The pivoting versions could be rotated to the necessary firing angle, which allowed the boat to attack a target without turning the entire submarine toward it. This concept saved space inside and avoided large openings in the hull, but it had serious drawbacks. The torpedoes and mechanisms remained exposed to seawater. They suffered from corrosion, the pressure at depth, and potential damage. Plus, once fired from the external mounts, they were impossible to reload while on patrol. So Foucault went into battle with serious striking power, but most of this arsenal could only be used once. The French submarine Foucault, part of the Brumare class designed by Maxime Leboeuf, was ordered under the French Naval Expansion Program of 1906. This program aimed to strengthen the submarine fleet amid growing tensions in Europe. France wanted to modernize its submarine forces after its early experimental projects. The order went to the Cherbourg Arsenal, a key naval facility in Normandy where most French submarines were being built at the time. Construction started almost immediately, and on November 1, 1906, the keel was laid down at the Cherbourg shipyard. The project brought in experienced shipbuilders and engineers from the French naval arsenal, and they also used licensed parts from German manufacturers to meet the technical requirements. The power plant featured 2 diesel engines from Maschinenfabrik Augsburg-Nürnberg, built under license by French companies like Atelier et Chantier de la Loire and Sauter Harl. This is a clear example of industrial cooperation between France and Germany in advanced naval technology before the First World War. Work on Foucault moved pretty slowly due to the challenges of submarine construction in the early 20th century, when innovation often outpaced manufacturing experience. The vessel was only launched in 1912, and it was commissioned in 1914. Such a long gap between keel laying and entering service was common for the time, since submarine equipment was still being developed right alongside the construction of the boats. Powerful marine diesel engines required high precision in manufacturing, and installing batteries demanded careful insulation, ventilation, and proper weight distribution. Changing one system could affect the balance, stability, shaft alignment, or the placement of other equipment inside the hull. As a result, the submarine, which was designed under the 1906 program, became a fully operational warship almost 8 years later, just weeks before Europe plunged into the Great War. The French submarine Foucault was launched on June 15, 1912, at the Cherbourg Arsenal, marking the completion of her hull construction. Since she was fully complete at the time of launch, the arming process began just 3 days later to prepare for operational trials. Next came the sea trials, which confirmed the design specifications for the Brumare class. The tests recorded a surface speed of 13 knots and a submerged speed of 8.8 knots. The maximum safe diving depth was 131 feet. The trials also included test firings of the torpedo armament. The boat was fitted with external Druzhecki drop collars, which allowed it to launch up to 8 17.7-inch torpedoes from external mounts on the hull. During final fitting out, engineers refined the power plant, loaded a full complement of torpedoes, and set up the living quarters for the 29-man crew. Foucault officially joined the French Navy on June 20, 1914, right before the start of World War I, and was assigned to the Mediterranean Fleet Reserve. In the short pre-war period, the submarine conducted several training patrols in the Mediterranean Sea to sharpen the crew's skills. When World War I began in August 1914, the French submarine Foucault was assigned to the Mediterranean Fleet. It moved into the Adriatic Sea as part of the Allied effort to counter the Austro-Hungarian Navy. The submarine was initially based in Malta before advancing to forward positions like Brindisi, Italy. By the middle of 1915, Foucault was operating as part of the French Adriatic Division. This division included several other submarines and their support ship, the Marceau. This deployment aligned with France taking the lead in Mediterranean operations following a naval agreement with Britain in August 1914, with the main focus on breaking Austrian naval dominance in the region. The Adriatic was a brutal theater for the large Allied fleets. It was a long, narrow sea, and much of its eastern side was guarded by Austro-Hungarian territory, islands, protected channels, minefields, and fortress bases. Pola in the north sheltered the main Austro-Hungarian battle fleet, while Cattaro in the south provided a heavily defended advanced base near the entrance to the Mediterranean. Allied battleships could blockade the exits, but entering these waters exposed them to mines, coastal artillery, torpedo boats, and enemy submarines. Because of this, smaller submarines like Foucault were assigned dangerous missions that commanders no longer wanted to risk giving to large cruisers and battleships. The strategic role of Foucault centered on supporting the Allied blockade of key Austro-Hungarian ports, especially Cattaro. The submarine also assisted in operations aimed at luring out the enemy fleet for a fight, joining coastal sweeps and bombardments along the Dalmatian coast. From 1914 to 1916, the submarine conducted multiple submerged reconnaissance and torpedo patrols off the coasts of Montenegro and Dalmatia. The crew monitored enemy movements and attempted to intercept potential attacks from bases at Pola and Cattaro. In January 1916, there were reports that Foucault torpedoed and sank an Austro-Hungarian Novara-class scout cruiser in the Adriatic Sea. However, Austrian authorities denied this, and the loss was never officially confirmed. By mid-1916, Foucault was commanded by Lieutenant Devon. He directed these operations while coordinating with surface ships at the Otranto Barrage, which was a massive net of obstacles and patrols designed to trap Austro-Hungarian vessels. Although Foucault launched torpedo attacks during these patrols, the submarine never recorded a confirmed sinking. A patrol off Cattaro combined strategic importance with extreme tactical difficulty. The submarine had to approach close enough to observe harbor traffic while remaining outside known defenses and conserving enough battery power to escape. Periscope observations were brief because even a small splash or an exposed mast could be spotted from shore, from a patrol boat, or from the air. Navigation relied on compass courses, measuring water depth, and quick visual checks. The clear water of the Adriatic made things even worse. A dark submarine hull could often be seen from the sky, even when it was 20 or 30 feet underwater. The clear water that allowed the submarine commander to see through the periscope also made it dangerously easy for enemy aircraft to spot them from above. Operating in the Adriatic brought massive challenges for Foucault. The sea had confined waters, frequent storms, and bad weather often ruined visibility, making navigation and periscope use nearly impossible. The submarine also faced a growing threat from the sky. Austro-Hungarian seaplanes constantly patrolled the coastal areas. They could easily spot and bomb submerged vessels, exposing a major weakness in early submarine warfare. Between the aircraft, the minefields, and being hunted by enemy destroyers, it became incredibly hard for French submarines to successfully attack Austrian harbors. The rise of naval aviation completely changed the game. Seaplanes flying from coastal bases could search large areas much faster than patrol boats. From the air, they could look down and investigate suspicious shadows or disturbed water, seeing things that surface ships simply could not. Early bombs were basic, and hitting a submerged submarine directly was tough, but even a near miss was devastating. The shock wave could damage the outer hull, crack tanks, destroy electrical wires, or knock heavy machinery out of place. An aircraft didn't even need to destroy the main pressure hull. It only had to damage the submarine enough to force it to the surface, right into the sights of nearby enemy warships. On September 15, 1916, the French submarine Foucault, under the command of Lieutenant Léon-Henri Devin, was patrolling submerged in the Bay of Kotor near Montenegro. This was part of an operation against the Austro-Hungarian fleet in the Adriatic Sea. At a depth of about 33 feet in the clear waters, the submarine was spotted by two Austro-Hungarian Loner L reconnaissance seaplanes. They were piloted by Lieutenants Dmitry Konjevic and Walter Zalesny, along with observers Maximilian Severa and Otto von Klimberg. These aircraft took off from the Kumbor Naval Air Base. The Loner L was a two-seat flying boat with an open cockpit and an engine between the wings. Thanks to its ability to take off and land on calm coastal water, it was perfectly suited for the Adriatic with its many islands. The main mission of the crews was reconnaissance, but they could also carry bombs to attack targets they found. That day, the flight altitude and the exceptionally clear water allowed the observers to see not just the periscope, but the entire silhouette of the submerged submarine Foucault. The seaplanes immediately went on the attack. They dropped 110-pound depth charges and 44-pound conventional bombs. Although there were no direct hits, the near misses caused serious damage to the submarine's engines, batteries, and hull. The crew of Foucault thought they had run into a minefield and tried to escape by diving to a depth of about 246 feet. But about 30 minutes later, the water flooding inside and the loss of propulsion forced the submariners to surface. The French tried to fight back with machine guns, but new bombs dropping nearby forced them to surrender. The next wave of attacks completely stripped them of the ability to submerge again or make repairs. The decision to surface was made under conditions every submariner dreads. Staying submerged meant the risk of uncontrolled flooding, battery failure, gas poisoning, or falling to a crush depth that the hull simply could not handle. Surfacing provided air and a chance to save the crew, but at the same time it made the boat an open target for the aircraft circling above. The diving depth of Foucault was about 131 feet, so diving to almost 250 feet was way beyond its capabilities. The crew clearly understood that the damaged submarine could no longer safely stay submerged. Left with no power and no ability to dive, Léon-Henri Devin ordered the crew to scuttle the Foucault and abandon ship. The crew set explosives, and the submarine quickly went to the bottom. Amazingly, all 29 crew members got out through the conning tower, jumped into the sea, and remained unharmed. Scuttling prevented the enemy from capturing the submarine, studying it, or repairing it. This decision required incredible discipline at a moment when instinct said to just get out as fast as possible. The sailors had to make their way through narrow compartments, climb up through the conning tower, jump into the water, and swim a safe distance away before the charges detonated. Having zero casualties was a real miracle in this situation, considering the bombing, flooding, and uncontrolled deep dive and evacuation in the open sea. What happened after the attack holds just as much historical significance as the bombing itself. Once the crew abandoned the submarine and it was no longer a threat, the seaplane landed on the water right next to the survivors. Its floats became a temporary support for the sailors in the water, and 2 officers were taken aboard. An Austro-Hungarian torpedo boat arrived shortly after, picking up the rest of the crew to take them to prisoner of war camps. The very same planes that destroyed the submarine became part of the rescue operation. In an era when submarine crews often vanished along with their boats, rescuing the entire team made this incident an unusual mix of new technology and humanity. In 1968, the French government officially honored the actions of pilot Dimitri Konjovic, and the event itself went down in history as the first confirmed case of a submarine being destroyed at sea by an airstrike. The sinking of the French submarine Foucault on September 15, 1916, by 2 Austro-Hungarian Loner L seaplanes became a major milestone in naval aviation history. This was the first confirmed case of a submarine being destroyed in the open ocean by an air attack. This event proved how effective aviation could be in anti-submarine warfare. This was especially true for seaplanes armed with conventional bombs and depth charges. It confirmed their ability to spot and destroy submerged targets from low altitudes. Previous encounters, like the sinking of the British submarine HMS B-10 while in port in 1916, were limited and did not yield results in the open sea. Losing the Foucault sped up the introduction of regular air patrols and convoy escorts as standard defensive measures during the later stages of World War I. The difference between a submarine destroyed in port and one detected and taken out during operations at sea was huge. The Foucault proved that an aircraft could spot a submerged boat, attack it with conventional bombs, force it to surface, and finish the destruction alongside surface ships. This attack did not yet look like the highly organized anti-submarine warfare of later decades, with radars, sonobuoys, magnetic anomaly detectors, and specialized depth weapons. However, the basic blueprint was already there. It involved air search, quick detection, a series of strikes, forced surfacing, and interception by the nearest warship. The incident revealed the fundamental vulnerabilities of early Brumare-class submarines, which the Foucault belonged to. They relied on charging their batteries while surfaced and operated at shallow diving depths, making them highly visible and vulnerable to low-flying aircraft. In response, the French Navy revised its patrol rules in the Adriatic. More focus was placed on evasive maneuvers, cutting down surface time, and coordinating with surface escorts to reduce the air threat in dangerous waters. This experience shaped naval strategy during the interwar period. It helped develop joint fleet and aviation tactics, prioritizing aerial reconnaissance over enclosed seas where submarines posed a constant threat. The sinking of the Foucault is recognized in both aviation and naval history as a pioneering achievement by the Austro-Hungarian Air Corps. Thanks to operations like this, they maintained air superiority over the Adriatic for most of the war. Importantly, all 29 crew members survived. They were rescued by the very same seaplanes that carried out the attack, along with an escorting torpedo boat. This highlighted the human element of submarine warfare amid the heavy casualties of the time, and it sparked discussions about rescue protocols in these new technological conflicts. This event also had an impact on submarine development. French designers started equipping their submarines with heavier anti-aircraft weapons and increasing their diving depth to counter the threat from the air. The loss of the submarine showed that submerged endurance could be just as important as speed or the power of its torpedoes. A submarine that was forced to surface frequently to recharge its batteries became a target not only for destroyers, but also for aircraft that could appear suddenly. Over time, designers began building stronger pressure hulls, better batteries, more reliable diesel engines, and more advanced submerged control systems. Weapons were now mounted inside the hull rather than on the outside. In this way, the Foucault found itself right on the edge of 2 different eras. On one side were the early vessels, which were essentially just torpedo boats capable of submerging for short periods. On the other side, increasingly powerful submarines were starting to emerge. For these newer boats, being surfaced became a dangerous exception rather than their normal operating state. The wreck of the French submarine Foucault lies about 10 nautical miles off the coast of Kotor in Montenegro in the Adriatic Sea. That is where she sank on September 15, 1916, following the attack by Austro-Hungarian seaplanes.